So what does a software developer do in an IT department? Now, a lot of you might not even realize that IT departments have software developers, and the truth is, not all of them do. There's two situations where you may not actually have software developers in an IT department. One is for a small company or organization. A smaller company, say, like take your elementary school that you went to, probably not any software developers working in that IT department. Now, another situation is there are some companies that choose not to do this. If they need custom software developed for their IT side of things, they are going to go to a contractor or consultant to develop that software for them. Now, I'm going to kind of include the job of the contractor or consultant here because in the end they are doing the same thing, it's just slightly different, and I will get into that. So if you are a developer in an IT department, you're going to be developing an application that, unlike if you're working for a company like, say Facebook or Microsoft, this is not actually their end product. This is not how they make money. You're doing something to aid in developing their end product, whatever that may be. So let's think of a few examples. Let's say I'm Publix, big company that sells groceries, mostly in the South. I very much miss them up here in Maryland. But if I'm an IT software developer that works for Publix, I might be given a task like, we want to have a program that classifies different types of groceries. And they might have several different types of reasoning behind it. One could be analytics. We want to just have a record of this and be able to go through data so that we can make decisions. We want to be able to report on what is being scanned in, what is being sold. So you can tell from that description that there's going to be a lot that goes into this. One is going to be, I need to actually know a little bit about groceries and the different groceries that Publix stocks. So this is where being an IT software developer, there's a little bit more emphasis as far as how good you can be at your job on actually knowing the organization you work for and how they work. So with this example, you're going to need that. And then you're probably going to need what we call integrations and maybe even some hardware. So you're going to be being asked to actually integrate with the way we're scanning things in currently. So you're going to have to be able to write software and figure out, how can I make my software communicate with the way we scan in groceries? So there's probably going to be other kinds of integrations along the way, like how can I get this data out to the person that needs to see it? This is one big challenge of being an IT software developer, is you need to know how to write the code, but you may also need to figure out how are you going to, communicate with the things that you need to communicate with. And that is something that you might not actually have any experience with and you might have to learn. So moving on, you're going to need to write the software. Now, when it comes to things like IT software development, a lot of times we use tools. We don't really start like say you're Facebook, right? You may really start from the ground up when it comes to making something, that, especially your final product, right? You may want it to be all your own. You don't want to have any more dependencies than you need to have. So you might really write some things very, very low level. When you're working as an IT software developer, you're going to try to do the opposite, which is don't reinvent the wheel ever if you can avoid it. What I mean by that is a lot of IT software development happens in what's known as software development platforms. Now, ServiceNow is one I've talked about on my channel. That is a great example of a software development platform. Another one I know of is SharePoint. Excellent example of a software development platform. Now, these platforms, most of the time, to actually do an application that goes all the way through end to end, you are going to have to write at least some code. In my experience, it's a decent amount of code. But there's also things that make it easier on you, where you may not have to write code, where another software developer otherwise would have. You'll use some kind of graphical user interface for things like workflows. You want this to happen, and then that to happen, and then that to happen. Now, you may still write code along the way, but you could also have a graphical user interface that just allows you to visually set that up and then write the code where you have to write the code, or use the graphical user interface where you don't have to write code. So one of the costs to using these platforms is how customized you can make it. And I work in ServiceNow. Generally, there aren't too many concessions that you actually have to make. But here's the real catch of working on one of these platforms. What you make up for in not having to write as much code, you lose in now having to know how to use this platform. And a platform like ServiceNow, learning how it works, even with its graphical user interface, could be considered just as challenging. So I'm doing this as a software developer. I'm using a platform. I'm making an application. Now, chances are the people in the company using this application, well, they may not even know that I use this software development platform to do it. But it works for the company because in the end, what it does is it means I, as a developer, can do what would normally take a lot more people to do. And now let me get into the kind of consultant role of being an IT software developer. So there are software companies out there that they do not want to do software development within IT. They have an IT department, but they generally just run servers, things like that. So they will go to a consulting company, also known as a contractor, and they will say, here is our project, we need people with these skills, and they will provide them. Now, if you're working for a consulting company like this, you are, in the end, doing the same thing that a person working for the company would do. But you have a few disadvantages. One of them is that you may not really understand the inner workings of the company, which makes things difficult. There's going to be a lot of things you're going to have to learn on the fly. It's probably going to lead to a lot more interaction with the stakeholders, just so you can learn how some of these things work. Had you been an employee at the company, you may have already known that from past projects. So another challenge is there might be travel to it. And I will admit there is less these days. But it was more customary not that long ago that if you were going to work on a software project for an IT department for another company, you would meet in person at some point. Today, not so much. It's less, right? And there's always a remote, a possibility of remote work depending on the nature, especially of what you're doing. So those are some of the challenges. Another thing is you will be doing multiple projects, multiple companies, and you may have to deal with different policies at these different companies. So one of the good things, though, is you are at a company now that everybody at that company does this type of software development. And usually it is more specialized, especially like with development platforms that, say with ServiceNow, you will have a consulting company that is all they do is ServiceNow development. It's not like all different kinds. It could be, but in general, it doesn't tend to be so much. So the good thing about this is it means you have a lot more resources when it comes to trying to figure out how to do what you need to do. This is a disadvantage to someone who works as an IT developer at that specific company because they may not have that many team members. They may have, they could be the only one, actually. I've seen cases where there is one developer for this platform and that is what they are doing. They are it. If they can't figure it out, it doesn't happen, basically. Of course, another thing I could get into is that some of these platforms, because you do pay for them, offer support so they're not completely alone, but some don't. So that's a big disadvantage if you are alone. Now, a lot of companies, you're not alone. You'll have some other people to work with. But if nobody knows how to do something or you have a question that no one can answer, yeah, you have less. You have less resources. So you have to rely on yourself a little bit more, and there is just less for you to go to, basically. So there are advantages and disadvantages of these two situations. For the company, there are also advantages and disadvantages. One big disadvantage for the company is support, that if you are to hire a consultant to write software for you and you want a change done in that software, you're going to have to go back to them and pay them again. And they are quite pricey. So an advantage is that if you don't have people developing software at your company, you don't have to pay them. And if they have nothing to do at times, you also don't have to pay them. So that's a decision that companies make. And I want to get back to, what more is there to it? And another thing there is to it is that you need to be a bit more of a jack of all trades, if that makes sense. That if you are doing IT software development, you might have to be a bit of a server admin at times. You might need to do something that requires some kind of server, and you might need to set it up yourself, at some point. And this depends on the size of the organization. That, where I work, there are server admins that is what they do in a dedicated way. But I might not be able to snag one for a little test I want to do to see if I can do something for a prototype, right? I might be better off just doing it myself, just standing that server up. So that comes with some skills. One of those skills is knowing server administration, being able to use a command line a little bit. Another one is actually just networking ability. And when I say networking, I mean, well, let's start with the first thing I mean. Understanding networks. If I can't hit my server, I'm going to need to figure out how to do that. I may not be able to bring in a network expert to do it for me, especially if it's something like for a prototype I'm working on. And it might not suit me to do that. So another thing I mean by networking is you're going to need to be good at finding these experts within the company when you do need something more permanent. So you need a little bit, of a jack of all trades type of approach. Another big one you're going to need is interpersonal skills, working with people. And here's a big reason why. You are going to be more directly working with the people that you're developing the software for. And this might make you feel better or make you feel worse, but you're probably going to develop some kind of relationship with the people you're developing the software for. Now, one of the reasons is it's not like you're just going to write it and you're going to send it on its merry way and you're never going to hear from this person again. Chances are, this is software they are going to be using all day, every day, or at least to some degree that. So what that means is they're going to want changes. They're going to find issues. And when they do, they're going to come to you to fix those issues or to make those changes. So you're going to need to be able to develop a good relationship with these people. Now, some of these people are technically skilled. They generally all have some type of skill, but not all of them know much about software, some more than others. And you're going to have to get good at working with these different groups of people and basically at the end of the day, making sure that they can do their job and do it effectively. So that's quite a bit of personal skills for a software developer because, as you probably know, software developers don't have a huge reputation for being huge people. But if you're going to be an IT software developer, you might have to be a little bit better at that. Not to say there aren't business analysts in IT, there definitely are, but as I've said in the business analyst video, it's a little bit more mixed, and you are going to be more involved likely in the process of interacting with what you would consider your customer or your stakeholder than you probably would be if you were working at Google or Facebook, where you may just be writing code at that point. Now, no offense to anyone that works at these companies, I'm sure that you have some level of interaction, or you might have some level of interaction in these situations. So when you're in IT, this is just generally the truth, and it doesn't really matter what role you're in. Now, I will say the software developer has, a lower level of interaction with a stakeholder or a customer than some other IT professions, like working a help desk, where that is your entire job almost. So that is kind of my summary of being, an IT software developer. Now, the one thing I do want to add is, what are the skills that you might need? And as you might guess, that could vary widely. If you're working in one of these development platforms like ServiceNow or SharePoint, then you're going to need to know not only how to code in the language that uses, but to use the platform itself. And that can be quite a challenge because these things are not just like Java, where you can go out and do a tutorial and make a video game. These might be a little harder to learn if you don't actually have a job doing it. And another thing you're going to need possibly is if you're not working in one of those platforms, just the coding skill, I mean, there are IT developers that write straight Java programs all the time. Sometimes these development platforms are not suitable for what the company wants to do, and you may have to actually just write it in Java. And there are people that write it straight Java, maybe use some frameworks and stuff like anyone would, and that's a thing too. So you're going to need to know the particular area you want to go in. You're going to need to have those skills. That's one of the biggest things. You're probably also going to need to show those interpersonal skills, because any good IT department that is hiring someone to do this is going to know that you're going to be interacting with people, and those people's opinion is going to matter to them. Because at the end of the day, when you are a software developer in an IT department, you are there to serve the people that actually produce things at the company or do things at the organization, work toward what's going on. It's a little bit of, there's definitely a point where you might feel like you're not really, you're the guy making the sandwiches for everybody that's actually doing stuff. But, the truth is, if you weren't writing your software, then the company wouldn't be able to do that thing that they're trying to do. The stuff that you're doing is being used. I think of it like, Star Trek, right? Somebody had to program those consoles, right? So I tend to look at it that way. I'm trying to think of any other skills. Just the jack of all trade type stuff, networks, knowing a little bit of networks, kind of knowing a little bit of everything is good. But of course, the software development is probably the primary skill, and that depends on the specific area you want to be a developer in. But almost all the time, you're going to need to know how to code. Okay, so a little bit long. This is the one that I do, so it was going to be a little bit longer. If you guys like this, please give me a like. If you want to subscribe to this channel, I want you to subscribe too. I'm going to make more stuff like this and probably branch out and do other stuff too. So leave a comment below, tell me what you want to see, tell me what you thought of this, and have a good night.